You're a failure.
And that's okay. Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Alicia. And we're failures too.
We take a walk back through people's failures and relive the mistakes they made so we all can have more clarity in how to be a better human. Welcome to the 2020 Perspective, where we make failure fun. Today we are speaking with a self-described entrepreneur and new education advocate, founder of All-American Model UN, and operations manager for Venture Cafe Cambridge. And I actually go to Venture Cafe every Thursday for cafe night because, I love the programming, the networking, seeing familiar faces each week, and, the drinks are nice too. He's the voice behind the Cracking Open Tech podcast and the mind behind Happy Wednesday. We're excited to hear all about his failure, which include highlights or lowlights of being accused of childhood slavery and announcing the closure of his education companies, which has never been heard before. Let's pull back the curtain and welcome to the podcast, Frank Pobutkiewicz. Hey, Frank, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It is a good Monday, a little bit of a hectic start, but I'm glad that I am here. Happy to speak with you guys.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're here. And I'm really excited to hear about how childhood slavery features into your particular story. When you were describing it to me before, I was definitely intrigued, and I stopped you before you could tell me any of the details so we could save it for this podcast. So why don't you set the scene? Tell us your failure.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to, I want to set some context first before I jump into the bulk of the story. So I started my first education company, the one that I still run, All-American Model UN, about a year after I finished my undergraduate at BU. Mm-hmm. I was enjoying what I was doing. I was about 3-4 years into that journey, loved the students that I was working with, but noticed a rapidly approaching ceiling to my growth coming in my future. So like most entrepreneurs, I felt starved for growth, so I was beginning to think about how I could grow the company. And I happened to be working in the CIC Cambridge, in the Cambridge Innovation Center, literally surrounded by hundreds of other entrepreneurs. And I said, I think I can take the same teaching techniques and pedagogy from my Model UN brand and transfer that into another vertical. And I said, wouldn't it be cool to do this with students interested in business and entrepreneurship?
Absolutely.
And one of the groups that I reached out to is called NCINA. It's the New England Chinese Information and Networking Association.
Okay.
Mainly a group of Chinese parents that got together and they brought speakers in to speak with them. And then at some point they were like, let's do something for our children on Saturday to get them involved in our world too. And so they had a teen program, got hooked up with them, did a couple of workshops with them. They loved the way that I presented, the way that I worked with the students. So they invited me to be a judge for their final pitch competition.
Okay.
And it's one of these innocuous events that when I look back was like a really pivotal moment in my business career, and I would have never known it that day. So it was me and 2 other judges that were going to be watching the presentations, the pitches of these 2 teams. One team had an idea for this convertible baby buggy carriage walker thing.
Okay.
Decent idea, but not well thought out, and there was no market research done. And then there was this other team that had an idea for a wearable, a watch that would somehow sense when the user was falling asleep and then shock them until it determined they were waking back up.
Okay.
I was like, okay, I got a whole bunch of different issues with this. But at the end of the presentation, they pull out a fully functioning prototype. And they say they already have the mold done in China. They're ready to go to market. His marketing needed serious work. He had no idea how to build a website. Long story short, for that day, that team won the pitch competition. But afterwards, I stuck around and I talked with the team, and I was like, I can help you sell these things. I know that I can help you sell these things. And that began that moment right there, at the end of that Saturday pitch competition, began a downward spiral that almost took out my entrepreneurial life.
Whoa. Okay. I am belted
Nice
in.
setup.
I'm ready to ride.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm ready.
We continue conversations. It's very clear they're all very young, 15, 16, 17 years old. So I'm like, okay, so we need to form your business entity. We need to get your brand right. They didn't even have a name up until that point. You need a logo. You need a website. You need marketing dollars. You need, social advertising dollars. So I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put together a package of, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I want to say the total package was about $10,000 of services and cash. So we got to work, and part of the agreement was every Saturday they had to come into my office. We had to spend 3 hours together working on the business, going over analytics, building out the website, teaching them how to do social. But as sort of like a last little part to the contract, I put in a couple of clauses. One, I put in a clause saying that I made this agreement based on the assumption that everything you're telling me is true. Right? That all of your Facebook followers are real, that you actually have this manufacturer in China, that you have all of the software ready that you've told me that you have. I said also in there that your GPA cannot go down while enrolled in this program. Because I didn't want to catch any slack of like having somebody's grades just fall off a cliff because they're doing this entrepreneurial activity. So we drew up this contract, which they finally signed on behalf of the business entity. So here are a couple of lessons off the get-go. I paid for their attorney.
Okay.
Who was also my attorney.
Oh.
Both of us waived conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. In the event that there was a conflict between either sides, we would have to find other representation.
Uh-huh.
I will never do that again for the rest of my life. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two is that I was under the impression that the legal entity could sign a legally binding agreement. I knew that a 16, 17-year-old as a minor could not enter into a legally enforceable agreement. In Massachusetts, actually, the minor has the option to respect the contract or not. Other states, it's just immediately void. But I assumed that if the business entity entered into the agreement, that would be legally enforceable.
Okay, so some legal quagmires.
Yes.
Frank, were you at any point, were you working with their parents or you're working with these students?
I had communication with the parents. The parents knew what was going on the whole time. I made sure it was okay with them. I had conversations with most of them. But I didn't have them sign the agreement.
Okay.
And that was a huge pitfall in my logic. So we start. We launch sales. We're not doing a lot, but we're doing a couple $100 every week. We're experimenting with different price points, different landing pages. I start pumping money into social ads. We're driving some traffic that way. And then we decide, okay, we think this would be a great product for Kickstarter. The CEO of the company, whose name, I'll call him Robbie, not his real name, he was a hustler. Like, you gave him an assignment and he just went. I was like, okay, you're in high school, you have an electronic wearable product, a tech product, you're a tech CEO. Email every news outlet in New England. Every reporter. I was like, but don't do it methodically. So get all of the contact information, design a drip campaign, and start shooting these emails off. He came back a week later with hundreds of email addresses of reporters and info accounts and tip accounts. So then I was like, this would make a good product for Kickstarter. It has all of those elements. It has a unique story. It has a unique product. We can get press around it. It's a very Kickstarter-esque project.
Can you tell us, just in case there are listeners who don't know what Kickstarter is, what that is?
So Kickstarter is a non-equity crowdfunding platform where artists, inventors, entrepreneurs can put a project up and people can support it monetarily in exchange for rewards, they're called. If you found a product or a comic book or a movie or whatever on Kickstarter and you were like, I'd love to see that happen, the person putting on the Kickstarter would say, okay, I need this much money to make it happen. And then if you pledge $10, I'll write you a personalized thank you card. If you pledge this amount, you'll get a free, the first edition of whatever it is that we're selling. The packages would go up anywhere between I've seen all the way up to $10,000.
Wow.
Okay.
So we set up his Kickstarter, was working with him from, let's say, February until July. July was the date of my boot camp, and we were like, let's launch it during the boot camp. We'll be living together in the dorms where this boot camp was taking place anyway.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of attention. We launch it. Then the first day, I think it hit $40,000 in.
Wow.
Wow.
So we're scrambling to answer emails and FAQs, and now we have to think of what our reach prizes are going to be. So a Kickstarter campaign will say, okay, we need to raise $25,000. If we raise $40,000, we'll give you everyone this extra perk. So we blew past. It was a $25,000 goal, if I'm not mistaken. We blew past it within the first 4 or 5 hours of the campaign. And we were climbing, and the press was coming out, and everything was going well. And I was like, this is great, because he's already exceeded that $20,000 milestone. So now I'm making, I think the agreement was like, I was making $6 for every unit they were selling.
Wow. Nice.
Until I recouped my money plus an extra $6,000. So I'm like, this is fantastic. About a month later, it was the end of August, I reach out to him, and he lets me know that 3 of the other co-founders have left the team.
Okay. All right.
And I'm like, all right. That really bothered me because I wasn't consulted, I wasn't asked, I was just being told this, and apparently well after the fact. Apparently they had left 4 or 5 weeks prior.
Oh, okay.
But I said, okay, we have this agreement. He goes, okay, I'll send you a check for the first royalty installment based on the first Kickstarter and the sales we've been doing on the website. So he sends me a check for like, I don't know, $1,400, something like that, which felt great to get. I was like, wow, I'm 1 for 1 with this thing already. It's great. And then all of a sudden, I'm having a really hard time getting a hold of him. Not answering my emails. He's not answering my phone calls. And my spidey senses are like on full overdrive at this time. So I checked the Kickstarter campaign. The comments are just freaking brutal. Where's my watch? This is a scam. Nobody's responding to me. So I send him sort of like an SOS message and say, what the hell's going, like this is, it's okay that you missed your deadline. That happens all the time with Kickstarter. You have to stay in communication with people. You got to let people what's going on. You got to let me know what's going on.
Right.
And I was totally left out in the blank. A couple more weeks go by, and I reach out to one of his former teammates, the student that I had more of a close relationship with. And I was like, he's not what the heck is going on? He goes, he didn't tell you?
Red flags everywhere.
Oh, Robbie dropped out of school.
What?
The Hustler. This is The Hustler, right?
5 months before graduating high school in his senior year, he dropped out of school? Yeah, he's going to become a tech entrepreneur. And I was dumbfounded. I literally didn't, I thought he was joking with me at first. I was like, this has to be a sick joke right now, right? So again, I'm trying to contact him. I finally CC his father on an email. They get back to me. They were like, there were all sorts of issues with the mold. They're getting a new mold done. They will absolutely ship everything so that products arrive by Christmas. And I was like, you got to get people their stuff by Christmas because a lot of these are gifts. It's just really bad optics to be 4 months behind on your promise. and people have already paid you. That was the thing that didn't seem to bother him at any point. So at that point, I start engaging his father, and I'm like, he needs to ship by Christmas, and he promises me, the student, not the father, promises me, absolutely, things will be shipped out by Christmas. Okay. I go home, celebrate the holidays with my family, New Year's Eve, I guess it was January 5th, January 6th, somewhere around that time. Look at the Kickstarter page again, and the comments are pouring in by the hour. I want my money back. This is a scam. Nobody's answering me. Haven't received my product. The products that were shipped were breaking or never worked in the first place. So I call him up. He answers, and I was like, you have to refund everyone their money. That is the only way you save face here. Your reputation and how you handle this right now has more of a crucial impact than you will ever imagine. And you won't realize it until 10 years after the fact. You don't want to be this person. Give the money back. Money's gone.
Oh.
And I'm like, what do you mean the money's gone? We're making 80% margins on this stuff, even if you have to borrow some money to pay people back. Or, maybe we ask everyone, those of you that are willing to stick with us for another couple of months, we appreciate everyone else. We will give you a full refund right now. He goes, no, all of the money is gone. Where did it go? He goes, I don't want to talk about it. All the money's gone, though. So I'm scrambling now. Now I'm in full crisis panic mode. And I was like, I have to distance myself from this before the bomb really goes off.
And you don't have any liability towards the actual business here. It's just now a reputation piece.
First rule of suing is you sue everyone for everything. And my name is listed on the Kickstarter page as an advisor. I'm listed in a number of different news articles as the primary advisor to this company. I'm going to do the worst damage possible to my reputation for a $1,200 royalty check. I need to just get away from this. So I read over the agreement for how I can end it, and I was like, right there. He was supposed to maintain a grade point average.
Yep. He dropped out of school.
Yep. So that was terms for termination. So I email him and I mail him a certified letter saying you violated the agreement in the following ways, and there were multiple ways, believe me, in which he violated this agreement. I'm terminating the contract and demanding repayment. And then his father decided to get involved. He says that I lied to his son, I coerced him into a contract, and then I took money from him.
Oh, no.
Conversation's no longer productive. I hang up the phone, and that's when he emails me and says, what you're doing is tantamount to childhood slavery.
There it is.
No.
There's the childhood slavery.
Oh, no. Oh, what's your thought when you read something like that?
I think I started laughing. I think I had any other response to be like, what's going on? In the span of 6 months, I went from running 2 successful education companies working with hundreds of students to being accused of childhood slavery. So the charge, the insinuation, the accusation of being a slave master washed off my back pretty quickly because I'm like, this is just ridiculous, and no human is going to take him seriously. What they are going to take seriously is the charge of unfair and deceptive business practices, which is one of the scariest terms as a business owner to hear in the state of Massachusetts, because it carries treble damages by statute. So whatever damages they hypothetically could prove would get tripled by the court automatically.
Tripled.
So if they were able to prove $20,000 of damages, I'd be looking at $60,000 of damages plus their legal fees.
Woof.
And at that point, that was more or less the size of my company. I can't speak with my attorney about any of this because I waived conflict of interest.
So, I mean, the decision of using one attorney, was that just kind of like a financial piece of like, why pay 2 when we just need to pay 1?
Yep.
This is why you pay 2.
Yes.
Got it.
He goes, I legally, ethically cannot talk to you about any of this. So I'm left inside of my own skull, which is just the worst place to be when you have absolutely no one to talk to. I didn't have any business partners. Explaining this saga to like someone for the first time just sounds ridiculous. And unfair and deceptive business practices in Massachusetts, I think, carries 5 years or 4 years, I forget at this point, a statute of limitations, after which they can no longer, try to go after those charges. So I laid low, but I couldn't get over this. Consumed me day and night. I felt betrayed. I felt stupid. I felt shameful. I lost confidence in my ability to teach and to read people's motives. I've spent 4 years trying to build these two brands. I have very little monetarily to show for it. I was sleeping maybe 3 hours a night. I was drinking 8 to 10 cups of coffee a day just to stay awake. Finally admitted to myself that I was broken. Physically, emotionally, spiritually broken. And I made the announcement that summer, I want to say May, it was in May. I said, this is the last hurrah. If anybody wants to do any of my trips, this is your last chance. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. And I took a major step back, step away, started plotting my life going forward. Stopped worrying about everything, and totally reworked my life.
What do you mean you reworked it? Were you just planning on maybe taking a different direction career-wise?
I was convinced that the life of the entrepreneur just wasn't for me. You know, I'm gonna go get a job. I had, all my buddies from college making 6 figures at their consulting firms and on Wall Street, and I was like, yeah, screw this. I'm gonna go get a job at TripAdvisor or HubSpot and work 40 hours a week and collect my paycheck, and I'm fucking done with everything. So I just stopped. I stopped worrying about everything, and I was like, I'm gonna take the next couple of months off. I took a couple of weeks where I don't even think I went into the office. The summer started, spent a lot of time on the Charles kayaking and on the beach, and life was good. All the while, more and more people kept signing up for my last trip in November. At some point I looked down and I was like, holy shit, I have 26 students signed up for this trip, and I'm going to make like close to 50 grand off of it. And I don't feel like killing myself anymore. I started enjoying what I was doing again. I started sleeping again. I made the promise to myself that I would sleep as much as I wanted every night. And I've kept that promise to this day. I sleep 7 to 10 hours every night like a baby.
Wow. I'm jealous.
A whole bunch of different things coalesced, and I did that trip in November with those ended up being 21 students that I took to Budapest, and just had a great time. And it reminded me of the first trip that I did with the first group of students 4 years before that in Beijing. And I was like, this is why I was doing this. Like, this is why. At that point, I had a student, her name was Morgan. She wrote me a letter after that trip. 3 pages, 3-page type letter about the impact that I had in her life, and was like, I understand why you're stepping away from this, but I really wish that you were. And I finished reading that letter, and I said, I can't stop. And decided to keep going. Since that point, the Model UN company has tripled in size. I have 4 people working for me. I've joined an incredible team at Venture Cafe Cambridge, so that day to day I have a support network of people that I work with and enjoy the work that I'm doing with the community there. Proud of everything that I'm doing. So, at 25, I had my quarter life crisis, I call it.
Me too. So, with all that being said, This might sound like a weird question, but was it worth it to go through that pain and suffering to see kind of the clouds part and get to where you are now?
You know, I wish I could just say, yes, it was worth it. But reliving it in this moment, it brings back a lot of the mental pain and anguish. I don't know. And I'm not willing to say something that 2 years from now I'll come back and want to correct. So I'm just going to have to answer it the worst way possible with an I don't know.
So it sounds like, you made a lot of positive changes based on this experience. So, besides having your own personal attorney, what are some other kind of like lessons from this experience that you've taken away? They're
different for everyone, but if I were to make some overarching goals, there are those micro business goals, right? You shouldn't have to go through an enormous failure like this to know that you should never waive conflict of interest with your attorney. Don't sign any sort of contract with a minor without their parent's signature. A whole bunch of those little micro lessons. The larger lessons, though, I realized were just about how I was living and how I was making decisions. I'm not actually a believer of this work-life balance mantra that a lot of people have, because if you're a founder, if you're an entrepreneur, your work is your life. But that doesn't mean you should be sacrificing your health and your sanity for it. And I think another learning point for me was figuring out how to make decisions quicker. I think that I could have handled myself better had, when I recognized a red flag, I didn't just sit on it, but I made a decision to take an action, measured the result of that action, and then acted again. Instead, at that point, I was seeing a red flag, sitting on it, watching it turn, and just hoping and praying that other people's actions would correct the issue, instead of making a quicker decision myself. I sort of call it the myth of serendipity. A lot of people say, things happened or everything happens for a reason, and you're in the spot that you're in. I don't really buy into that chain of logic. Like I said, I think it's the speed at which you make decisions to take action and then actually taking that action puts you on that upward trajectory, because you're taking an action, you're seeing what the result of it is, measuring it, and then taking another action as quickly as possible, instead of letting other people's actions dictate your reality.
Right.
So that's probably the most powerful takeaway that I have from that experience.
Yeah, that's really powerful, trusting yourself more. I think a lot of people have challenges with that confidence or the mistakes or failures that they've had, and they're unable to move forward from it. But it's knowing yourself and how you can approach things differently based off of what happened instead of staying stuck. So
yeah,
I took something away.
And now, I'm 31. I've already had my life crisis, so I don't have to wait until I'm 50. So I sort of think that now I'm ahead of the curve, and I can spend the next 60 years of my life being productive.
Okay, I've said the exact same thing before too. I've gone through my quarter life crisis. I had my gap year where I quit my job and I said, fuck y'all, I'm leaving, go on the other side of the world. And now, I feel like, okay, I got that all out of the way, but things still keep popping up. I think that's just part of life. Things pop up and it's like a new challenge that you have to work through. And the messages and the lessons from the last ones just only help you navigate it differently.
Well, the cool thing now is that if another catastrophic failure event happens, I can say, okay, you know what? Took care of it. I'm 40 now I can start again. I'm 50 now, I can start again.
Every 5 to 10 years. It's a good kind of
It's just more
tradition.
material for your book, for your future book.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to this story. I was wrapped. It was like a Grisham novel, but with like less blood and killing.
I know, that was a great story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Absolutely. I hope that, I've been encouraged to share this story by other people before. I've always used the excuse of I want to wait until the statute of limitations has expired. This is probably going to be one of the central stories in my book, Happy Wednesday, when I finally do publish and release that. And there are a lot of different lessons that I think people can take away from it. And I think storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool. So thank you guys for having me on. I look forward to hearing this episode.
So the conversation with Frank was really interesting. I had not realized, one, he had that type of professional journey, but so many different like small decisions that completely just blew problems up out of proportion that you wouldn't have predicted beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. Like, he had so many small lessons learned that I think is going to transform the way that he does business and the way that he operates. I wrote down a couple things. I don't know what I was thinking. Like how deep the pain and suffering that he experienced was. Mm-hmm. Like, he had a physical and mental connection to this work and to the failure that he experienced. Like, it was a full body kind of experience. Work is really tied deeply to his life. I remember he mentioned that he doesn't really believe in this work-life balance because when you really love what you do, it's part of your life.
Yeah.
And I also like that it's really, and especially now with coronavirus, people are working from home and they really are integrating their work into their home life. And I think we're going to see that more commonly. So it was interesting to see how that failure really affected not just his work life, but his wholeness, you know, his whole human self.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder though, entrepreneurs, they're so tightly tethered to their work and their life is so enmeshed that a professional failure, you can't really segment it and kind of put it into a separate part of your life because it still is your life. And I don't know if that's better because you're going through so much more emotional ups and downs and you're kind of building the skills to process through it, or that you run the risk of really getting overloaded with personal failures and professional failures just colliding together. Like, how do you process through two things at once? Like, your capacity is just maxed.
I kind of can really relate to that right now in my life. Like, failing everywhere. But you know what I found really interesting that he said was that he went through the quarter life crisis. Mm-hmm. And I too have gone through the quarter life crisis. And I think a lot of people go through not necessarily a quarter life crisis, but a crisis of their identity at some point in their life. And I don't think, and my question is, and I don't think that this is a question that we can answer, is does that happen to people who are like really ambitious or motivated or determined or just fuck ups, or you know what I mean? Is it because I don't know if you hear about it a lot or people just aren't talking about it as much. I feel like every few years I'm reinventing myself and I am massively failing. And is it because I'm trying new things and putting myself out there, or is it just because I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself, or is it because I'm in my own body and see it and feel it, and I don't really see others doing the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably you're exposing yourself to more things, so you're naturally going to be failing more, so you're going to be reinventing yourself more. But also, I think to survive in that type of lifestyle, you have to have pretty attuned to your emotional state and really assessing things. So I think your natural sensitivity is heightened as well. So, I mean, I feel the same way. It's like I look at my life and I say, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something bigger and better and change. And then you really have to dial into yourself. And so maybe you are going through a quarter life and then a 1/3 and then a 2/5 life crisis because you're so aware of what your emotional state is going through that you're going to fail. You're going to fail a lot more because you're doing more. But then you're also going to be like, oh my gosh, I failed there. Oh my gosh, I failed there. Oh my gosh, I failed there. I mean, it's plight of the millennial, maybe.
But also another thing that I found interesting with Frank is that when we asked him if he would do it all over again, to get those chunks and nuggets of lessons learned, he was unsure. He hadn't really either. He's been processing it, and I think he's still on the journey of processing it, but he's like, yeesh, I don't know. I think it was so painful for him that he's still unsure if it was even worth it to get these nuggets of knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that why we wanted to start with this podcast was not to get the people who have failed and then moved on and gotten super successful. And so looking back, it's very rosy and polished, and, you have that selective memory. And I think, getting people who are right out of their failure and still in it, they can give you a much more truthful answer, which is, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't know. Like, I feel like I'm failing all day in my life, and I don't know if I would do it again. But maybe 20 years from now, when I see all the success that comes from it, or more failure, maybe then I'll be like, yeah, of course I'd do it again. But it's really hard now because you're in the middle of it.
You have that jaded perspective.
Yeah. There's actually, so Malcolm Gladwell did a podcast talking about kind of selective memory, and he talked specifically, I believe it was about Dan Rather, and his memory about being a wartime reporter, and how his memory became unreliable, not necessarily for any ill reason or any kind of nefarious, like, let me sound cooler than I actually was, but just natural human remembering. And he got raked over the coals, according to the podcast, because, he was remembering him more and more heroic and more in the action as a wartime reporter. But really, it's just the memories just start morphing over time. And that is that's part of the human condition. It helps us cope, but it also makes the past unreliable.
Wow. So
cool
you can
podcast.
That's really cool. You can never really rely on your own perspective then.
Yeah. That's why you need data. You need 2020 data. Thanks to No BS Brass Band for the Bang & Show music. Check them out at nobsbrass.com. And subscribe on your favorite podcast player, or follow us on Facebook to get the newest failures delivered right to your ears. And may your failures be spectacular.